Hey guys, welcome to another edition of Founder Wisdom Podcast, Digital Nomad Edition. Today we have Florian Jacques with us. He is co-founder and CEO at Midstay. Florian, welcome to the pod. Can you introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about Midstay?
Hey Charles, thanks for inviting. Sure. So my name is Florian, as you just mentioned. I'm from Belgium, and I was traveling before COVID as a freelancer to help startups. I was working for the last 5 years before COVID in San Francisco, in New York, in Australia, all the time coming back in Belgium because I was organizing a music festival. So that was the project that kept me in back in Belgium all the time. But then we decided to shut it down at the end of 2019, which we did well because COVID arrived just after. And early 2020, I decided to take one flight ticket to get to Bali, work a few months there to avoid the crazy frozen winter in Belgium. And I got stuck in Bali after 1 month as there is the COVID that hit. And yeah, I decided to stay and I met my co-founder 6 months after. His name is Magnus. And that's how we started Midstay, a platform for helping remote workers.
Very nice. You also spent some time in China. I also did, and it changed my life, the culture shock and so forth. How's been your time there?
Yeah, China was quite interesting actually. That was during the time I was still at the uni, so we did like an exchange there. And the idea is that we are doing like some kind of like workshop with Tibetan artists. So the idea is that as a digital designer, I was facing this kind of like traditional art as the Tibetan was actually coming out of the mountain in Shanghai for a month with us. And the idea is that we had to blend their own traditional art into a digital experience. So it was very interesting.
You also went through accelerators and went through a YC startup, Upcall, plus worked at Mailbox, all startups that I personally know. What did you learn from that time?
So very interesting as well. And that was during the time that I was 5 years before COVID. So traveling from one startup to the other, I was having mission from 3 to 6 months and all the time helping founders that were having business ideas and that needed someone like me, a product designer, to help them translate their business ideas into a visual experience. So really being the glue in between the executives and the engineering team, making sure that the product, once validated with the executives, was well implemented live and was well implemented on the market. So making sure that managing the engineers and making sure that everything was well implemented based on my design.
Then I want to talk obviously about the festival. You started this with your brother, which is interesting in itself, but we know how chaotic festivals can be. 3 days with more than 17K people. So that's 17,000 people, which is crazy in itself. Tell us about like funny stories or just managing pure chaos when you were co-founder of that festival.
Yeah, wow, that's a good question. So, like for the true context, my father started 10 years before, and then my brother joined me after a few years, and we were managing the festival together, managing over 500 volunteers, managing over 30 artists on stage, 3 stages, and one of the funniest, not so much funny at that time, but it can be fun now, is that basically one of the headliner needed to have some cocaine to get on stage, otherwise they didn't want to get on stage. And that was just super hilarious. We were just like not hilarious at that time for sure. It was a big stress because it was like thousands of people waiting for them, and they needed that kind of thing to get on stage. So we had to do it. And I guess like, as a festival organizer, these kind of things, you need to be agile. And that helped me to learn a lot of things as well, not to replicate the same in the startups, but, agility is a big thing.
So yeah, when we think of artists' lives, and we're like, oh, I want to be that dude. But when you actually know what their life is like, they actually need coke to get on stage. It makes you double think. I'm not saying like all artists are like that, but their lifestyle is so crazy and chaotic, as we've seen with Avicii, which is really sad. Was one of my
Yeah.
favorite artists, and yeah, just terrible what this guy submitted his body to, right? Like alcohol after alcohol, even after his liver was failing him. um I'm guessing you've got also another glimpse of the artists' lives. Can you tell us a bit more about that career choice? Like, do they make crap loads of money? Is it always a rose colored world, or is it like more ups and downs and a night partying and the hangover the next day?
Yeah, what we understood as an organizer and speaking a lot with agents and manager is that these people are actually, you know, like holding the whole show. And so basically they are the one putting a lot of pressure on the artist. And if the artist has some engagement and basically he has to do all these dates and he can't say something else. So basically, yes, it's a lot of pressure on them, on their shoulders, and not sure that actually they are liking it all the time. And I think sometimes they just need to do it. That's it.
Right. Then let's get to the nomad parts of things. You went to Bali, you were stuck there. First, how did that feel to be away from home and not be able to take flights? Did you fully adapted as a digital nomad back then, or was it like forced on you and you kind of suffered in the process?
Oh, I really enjoyed it. Bali was one of the only places where you can still surf every morning, where you can still like, you know, go to party because just the island was actually closed for everyone else. So everyone that stayed was there safe and no one was actually getting in. People were getting out, so the island was getting emptier and emptier, which was just amazing. Now that you see Bali right now, it's a bit different. But we enjoyed like many months without many tourists and being crowded here. So it was actually an amazing experience, and I'm sure that it changed my whole life because otherwise I would not be here. I would not have been created midstay, and clearly I would maybe be back in San Francisco and New York, but I wouldn't be surfing and having a work life balance as I have currently and a very good quality of life. So yeah, I guess this is like for the good, and I wouldn't say I've been suffering. That would be a big lie.
Right. Do you still have a couple more minutes to tell us about Midstay?
Sure.
All right, go ahead, because that's quite an interesting organization. Me, I have kind of a fear of like events-based businesses because they're so temporal. They're really nice because they are experienced and you can make up memories that last up a lifetime. And it kind of forces us to be present, right, and back to your tribalism and your humanity. But from a money perspective, like they don't really scale and so forth. And I think it's a lot of stress. I have managed multiple events myself for my businesses in the past. So tell us about Midstay in itself and the pros and the cons to that business.
That's a pretty good question as well. And as you mentioned, like events are super hard to scale, and I've been understanding that from the music festival. So that's why with Midstay, actually what we are doing is that we're matching remote workers that we know feel lonely. That's why they come on Midstay. They want to connect with like-minded people around them because we know their proximity, we know their location, and we match them based on their interest, based on the location based on the lifestyle, based on all that. And Midstay is not creating the events. Midstay is generating the connections. So you can see that we are reusing a lot of codes from dating app, that's for sure. But it's not a swipe right or left. It's just like we're recreating the colleagues environment that people are losing. And so you used to have like your 10 colleagues, you don't have them anymore, but by traveling, you can still have them by using Midstay because Midstay is actually pulling you with peers around you.
Right. And me as a nomad, yes, I kind of want this touch and feel with other nomads. I get along really well with these other nomads, mostly because we all love to get outside of our comfort zones. We most of us are all entrepreneurs and run our online business. So we share a lot in common or love for travel, for example. Yet it seems that, yeah, like I'm quite kind of obsessed with productivity. I don't really want to move in some place just to work with people. You know, I'm not at that stage. Don't really need that motivation, or don't really need, or don't have the need for that. For example, I have my wife. You know, I have my family, and I have some friends. I have my dogs. You know, so what kind of nomads are interested into this, and is it them that pay from their pocket? Is it their businesses? Is it like nomads that are starting in that journey? Can you tell us a bit more about the profile characteristics, the customer persona of your ideal clients?
Yeah, sure. So indeed, they are actually nomads that are most of the time coming like the first months in the journey. So they need actually to connect with other people to also help them get started. But really important as well to know is that these kind of events and kind of meetups are not to actually co-work together. They could be, but it's not only that. So I agree with you. Myself, I wouldn't be actually joining other people to co-work with them because I want to have my own productivity on my own. But what it's also happening on the platform, what we see, it's like these kind of groups are actually also happening for meetups, for lunch, for a break of coffee, for after works, for this kind of like social moments that they need to actually break that kind of work that's actually you're doing. Otherwise, you're just working all the time. So it's really about like bringing these people together, and then some chemical events are actually happening afterwards. And so speaking more about the person now, we're speaking about people in between 25 to 40 years old, and people that are traveling in, I wouldn't call them slow nomad at all. Speaking about really a proper nomad that are traveling in between 2-3 weeks to, I would say, 2 months to every new places, and basically need that kind of like social circle coming back all the time, which means they understand who they've been actually connected to before. They've been understanding the system, understood that actually these people were actually like-minded and they really enjoyed these interactions. And so we are actually reproviding that kind of same profile we have in different other destinations where this nomad is actually heading to.
Right. I think I'm using Bumble to meet like new friends, and there's also Bumble Business, but it's mostly like not nomads, mostly local folks, which I'm cool meeting with. Been using Nomad List as well to see if there's other nomads around, but even that doesn't seem to be ideal. Me, what I would want is kind of a platform saying that this guy is traveling here, for example, and he may want to meet some local folks, some kind of app like that, which I still haven't found. What are your thoughts on what I just said? And for example,
I love that.
Nomad Lists and all of these apps.
Just to speak first about what you said, speaking about like connecting with locals, this is like one of our biggest drive. We really like this idea of like brain gaining, where you can actually share knowledge in between people that are coming from Western countries and someone else in the same industry or field coming from Jakarta, for example, here in Indonesia. And they're actually doing the exact same job. They have different frameworks and they have a lot to share together. So that's actually what really excites us, these kind of connections. And we see that happening quite a lot on the platform. So that's great. And speaking more about the other actors and platforms, on my side, I always felt really weird swiping left and right as Bumble on a guy. It's really weird. It's like contradictory to me. Like so that's really something that we didn't want to bring in Midstay. We don't do swipe right and left. It's not a dating app. It's more networking platform, I would say. And then on Nomad List, for sure, I think it brings quite a nice approach as well. But what our members really like is that we really see the proximity on a map of like where are the people on my neighborhood, like really speaking about a few kilometers away. And so that's something interactively that people really like. And as we are really focusing on social, I do believe we're also bringing more features than Nomadly that is providing a lot of different services.
Right. It's funny because Mexico City is #1 on Nomad List, and says that safety is like low. I never got like safety issues anywhere in Mexico, which is interesting. My next question is, what's the future of traveling? We've seen Starlink. I intend to buy kind of my wagon, my Nomad van, and travel around with Starlink. We've also seen these cruises in which you can do many countries and even paid like a condo and travel around the globe around the year. So that's also interesting. What trends have you been seeing in the future of travel for nomads?
That's a pretty good question. And to me, it's not about like all these options you actually mentioned to me are quite fast traveling. And I know that a lot of people are now quite conscious about sustainability and all that and climate change and all that. So I do believe that I would see more and more like slower travel and being a bit more, I would say, conscious about meeting proper locals, making your own local experiences, and basically just taking time actually to immerse yourself in the local experiences. So and that's actually what myself I've been understanding I really enjoy more and more, which allows you to indeed be productive because you don't move that much, and then you actually get to have a proper cycle of people around you, and then you move on to the next step after a few months, but not after a few days or a few weeks.
Right. Last but not least, where can people find out more about you, Florian, and about Midstay?
Yeah, sure. So they can connect with me on LinkedIn, so Florian Jacques on LinkedIn, and connecting on Midstay. So Midstay is free for sign up. Then for sure there is a few extra premium features, but very easy to get started for free. So it's a few seconds to create an account, and that's midstay.com.